Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, will make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Gaelic Lives podcast. We're looking back at another huge weekend of championship action across a number of different counties, and I'm delighted this morning to be joined by Kieran Lynch from the Newry Reporter on Armagh TV, and he's going to help us look back at the Armagh Championship. Now, the group stages are almost done. There's one more game to play, but we know the general lay of the land at this stage. And Kieran, I think you needed your calculator over the weekend just to work out a few of the groupings.
Yeah, no doubt about it. With many leagues and points difference and points for and everything else that came into it, plenty of teams went up and down the table throughout the night. We were talking off air there. Silverbridge top of the group at half time, bottom of the group at full time. Even Clevie there on Sunday night. I think when the game was level with Clans, had they kicked the next point, they would have been top of the group. If Clans kicked the next point, Clevie would have been bottom of the group. So there were teams up and down. It's not too sure of themselves, but thankfully, I think we got there in the end between ourselves and Armagh TV, everybody, CCC trying to work everything out. And yeah, as you said, now probably a bit more straightforward from this point on.
Kieran, you mentioned the Clevie and Clonagale game. We'll start there because Group A was the cliched group of death, and Clevie just about get over Clans, I suppose, and Mahary saw off Cullaville. So that's saying Mahary go through to the quarterfinals, and Clevie and Cullaville then they're through to the playoffs with Clonagale dropping out.
Yeah, you mentioned it there. You called it the group of death. I suppose when the draw was made, there's always groups you're looking at, and straight away you're saying that looks like a great group. But I think it actually exceeded expectations, which were already pretty high, to be honest. I mean, every single game had drama. We've said it a lot throughout the year. Clevie, the league champions, that they're the most entertaining team to watch in Armagh. For any neutrals, if you ever fancy tuning into an Armagh game on Armagh TV or anything like that, you could do a lot worse than to watch Clevie. Stevie McDonald, Marty Clark in the coaching team there. They set them up to go all out attack, and when it works, it's brilliant. And look, to be fair, Clevie is working more often than not. Like last night there against Clans, it was miserable night, horrible conditions, and actually first off, very low scoring. 4 points to 1-1 at half time. Clevie actually had the breeze at their backs and didn't play well, but then playing into the breeze, they came out. They showed good hunger. And look, to be honest, I actually Clonagale lost all 3 games, and I'd even be cautious to be that critical of Clonagale, to be honest. Even for themselves, they're right there, give it a right go themselves. Pipped at the post by Cullaville last week. That'll be the game that will second them, I'm sure, the most. Being 10 points up and losing that game last week, and there last night they came down to Clevie. Hard place to go at the best of times on a rotten night. And they did look. They just came up short 2 points. And from Clevie's point of view, they had young Aaron McGuinness there, only a teenager, 18 or 19, and what a game from him. He finished at 1-5. His goal came with Clevie 4 points down. Maybe looked like the tide was turning against them, and McGuinness stepped up, juked his man inside out, and put it in the bottom corner. That's it's a great moment for him personally, and so good for Clevie to have a young fella stepping up in what was essentially a knockout match, just the way that the Mahary result went. They obviously beat Cullaville, and it meant that whoever lost that game was heading out of the championship. So it was great drama, great entertainment. And I suppose, Sean, when these groups were brought in, that was the sort of stuff that people wanted to see.
Just on Mahary, Kieran, they just survived the drop from intermediate. They beat Pierce Ogan the last day, which was basically a relegation match. But to come from that to top on the group, top on the group of death without Aidan Falker, I don't think he has played in any of the championship games. So huge result for Mahary, and it sees them get a couple of weeks break and straight into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, a massive result for Mahary. I think a lot of people in Armagh over the last while, maybe Mahary aren't the contenders that they were, obviously, when the championship was a couple of times a few years ago. But people always talk about them on home turf, that teams don't come down and get it easy in Mahary, and we know that. So I thought going away from home, Cullaville with 2 wins from 2 in their first 2 games, I was expecting Cullaville to get the result there and top the group, going as well as they are. But I think last night that the gap in experience was massive. Maher had been thereabouts in senior football for many years. Cullaville, as you know, come up from intermediate a few years ago. A very young team. Even a lot of their star players are boys who were part of that 21s championship winning team last year. And coming up against Maher, they have all the know-how you need right up there at any team in Armagh. And I think that gap in experience really made a difference. By all accounts, Ben Creeley had a superb game in midfield, and he sort of laid the platform. And we were covering obviously the Cleedy Clan Gaelic game on Armagh TV, but we had scores coming in from that game throughout. I think Maher got in front and never relinquished their lead. So just a controlled, managed 60-minute performance from them. And look, to be honest, they're probably a team coming into the championship not a lot of people were talking about. But once you're at this stage now, you're into the quarterfinals. One or two results go your way, and all of a sudden you're right thereabouts. And as I said, with Maher's experience, we hope Walker can come back. I know they've 3 weeks now. You never know if he can get back fit again, and what a difference he'll make. And I don't think teams want to see Maher coming down the track in this quarterfinals.
Group B, Kieran, I know we still have one outstanding game. Cullyhanna and Mullabon are playing this coming Sunday, but at the minute it's Cullyhanna top of the group. The Oaks are gone; they're out of the championship. And Madden and Mullabon, I think, can still top the group. It would take a massive. Mullabon would have to win by a huge margin, I think, to top the group against Cullyhanna. But a lot to play for in that last round, and Madden are just sort of sitting, waiting to see how it all pans out.
Yeah, Madden can't do too much at the moment. Good win from them yesterday against Mullabon. As you said, obviously that Cullyhanna Mullabon game postponed last week, and good to hear positive news coming from Pierce Casey that he's on the mend, and obviously wish him the best of his recovery. But it just leaves it now. Madden probably in that bit of limbo. Their score difference was certainly helped yesterday there, that big 13-point win, and if Mullabon can get a result, or will I have to beat Cullyhanna to see Madden top the group on points difference. But that's a hard one to call. We sort of talked about Cullyhanna were going very well. The win in round 1 against Madden was massive. You sort of felt that night coming out of the game, without trying to be disrespectful to Mullabon, perhaps that was the game that the winner of that would top the group. But just maybe not at their best stuff. Yesterday they got a 1-point win over Pierce Oaks, and as you mentioned, the Oaks finished bottom of the group, no points. I suppose sometimes in championship football you just need a win by hook or by crook. From Cullyhanna's point of view, Eden Nugent obviously stepped up massively for them, and maybe pulled them out of a bit of a hole there yesterday, Cullyhanna. But yeah, you'd imagine if they're back next week playing their best stuff, that they should get a result and ultimately top the group as they did last season. From Mullabon's point of view, it's probably really disappointing yesterday. Mullabon are a good side, some really talented players. Shay Loy obviously started the championship brilliantly. Jack Malloy, fantastic player. Owen McDonald back in as well. A couple of other really strong players as well. Just obviously didn't turn up. Only kicking 9 points, away to Madden. And that leaves them now. They're in a lot of bother going into this last round. As you said, they need some massive scoreline, probably in fairness, an unrealistic scoreline to top the group. So they're going in, to be honest, it's not a whole pile to play for, and that just might. Maybe Madden have actually done themselves a disservice by winning as much as they have, because it might suit Cullyhanna more that Mullabon might be that incentivised going into this last round of the group.
Group C, Kieran, Ryan O'Neill was the big story this weekend, and he kicked 14 points against Silverbridge, which put Cross top, Silverbridge out, while Grahamore beat St Peters, and St Peters ended up second, I think, Grahamore third. So Ryan O'Neill, the big story. He was the big story last week for Cross, kicking the winner against St Peters, but he kicked 14 points at the weekend. And I suppose the 2-pointers, Kieran, just if he has any bit of a breeze to his back at all, he's going to kick at least 10.
That was ridiculous. It was an absolute exhibition, to be honest, from Ryan O'Neill, and exactly from a neutral point of view here in Armagh, it's exactly what you want to see. We talk about within the county this past year that the rule was brought in for Ryan O'Neill, because he was kicking shots like that even when they're only worth one, But yeah, some of the scores. I mean, he kicked 5 2-pointers in total. Maybe 3 of those were from frees, but when you're talking about frees, you're talking about 55, close to 60 meters. Some of them, then the ones from play. into his hands and straight back out of his hands, catch and shoot, up and over the bar. I think he kicked a couple of off his left foot. Even the 1-pointers he was kicking were of absolute the highest quality, you know. And look, to be honest, we'll obviously get to Group D, and Clonard are the reigning county champions. Clonard are going very, very strong. They can have no complaints so far, and perhaps you're starting to get the feeling after their game on Friday night that Clonard could run away with this. But from a neutral point of view, as I actually said to you, Sean, on Saturday evening, it is great to see a performance like that from Cross. They won that second half by 18 points. Rian O'Neill playing his best stuff, and Cross, even people within Cross would admit, they didn't probably set the world alight the first couple of rounds of the championship. If they find a bit of form, and certainly if Rian O'Neill's playing like that, you genuinely give him a chance against anybody. Obviously, the Kieran McConville there as well, excellent player. Young Aaron O'Neill's made a big impression this season. Couple of plenty of experience in defence, like James Morgan there, Paul Hughes. They're hoping maybe to get Oisín O'Neill and Keelan Cumsky back as well as the championship goes deeper. And yeah, as I said, it's some equaliser to have a man like that, like Rian O'Neill, who can ping over points from anywhere, you know. And sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kieran.
So yeah, just on the other teams in the group, you know, you touched on St. Peter's lost, but came second in the group. Just that mini league coming into effect again. That's ultimately what sent Silverbridge down. When they look back at the group, it wasn't the Cross McGlenn result that put them down. It'll be that first round against St. Peter's that they're going to look back on and really regret. You know, they come in. St. Peter's obviously relegated from 1B. Silverbridge relegated from 1A, but they would have been favourites going down to Lurgan. It just didn't perform on that night at all. I mean, St. Peter's were brilliant, Silverbridge were poor, and Peters were full value for that win. And probably when you look back now at the table, as it stands, that's the result ultimately that's made the difference. You know, Silverbridge could have been going into this playoffs now in second place. St. Peter's would be out, but instead it's the Bridge who finished bottom of the group.
That group just showed the craziness of the group stages, Kieran, because we were talking off earlier. Silverbridge were winning by 9 points at half time, which saw them top the group, and by the end of it, they're out of it. Like, so, I think you actually mentioned that at the start too. It just shows the craziness of the group system this year.
Yeah, it was wild. You know, certainly during the week we were getting the mathematics done, getting the calculators out, and you're trying to discover every single possible outcome that can happen. You know, between two games, there's always 9 different pairs of results. You know, either side winning, draws in there as well, just to see exactly what the group might look like at the end of the day. But to be honest, I'd sort of flagged it up during the week. It says if Cross win and Greenmore win, the two home teams, that was always going to leave Silverbridge bottom of the group. You know, so they would have known that too. I'm sure the Bridge, they were under a lot of pressure. And you talk about a game of two halves. You mentioned it there. Silverbridge were 9 points up at the break. Very strong win there. And Cross actually won that second half by 18 points, and they ended up winning the game by 9. So just total game of two halves. And the Bridge will be disappointed. I think the first, you know yourself, when you have a lead like that, playing into the breeze, you want to just take the sting out of any momentum, slow it down, keep your hands on the ball. I think within 10 minutes of the second half, Cross were back in level terms. You know, it was very quick. You mentioned Rian O'Neill. Ronan Fitzpatrick actually chipped in as well, 2-pointer. Keane McConville got a couple of 1-pointers, and O'Neill kicked those 2s. And then all of a sudden, you're looking at the scoreboard, and it was level. So Silverbridge would be very disappointed about that. And I think, to be honest, overall, the Bridge never caught fire this year in the championship. A disappointing one for them, and they'll have to come back and regroup now next year.
Group D, Kieran, you mentioned with the county champions in Clonard. Top on the group, you have Kerr in second, the Harps third, and Drummond crash out of the championship. So I know you've seen Clonard a couple of times, 2 or 3 times in the championship so far, and you've been impressed with what you've been seeing.
Absolutely, Sean. Yeah, they are a well-oiled machine. I think it's fair to say at the minute they're just going about their business. You know, they're just taking care of the games that they should take care of. I describe them as professional, like in the way they approach things. You know, certainly round 1 against Carcroppen, they won that game by 23 points. Their defence only gave up 5 points against the Harps last week, or on Friday night. They won by 13 points, and the defence only gave up 6. So if you're only conceding 5.6 points, you're not going to lose a game of football, you know. And 11 different scores against Croppen, 10 different scores against the Harps. There has been standouts. You know, Conor Herbert's one of the top scorers in the championship. Tierney Kelly was phenomenal. In midfield on Friday night, Brian McCambridge got forward, got a goal. Sean McCarthy and Shea from the defence, I was very impressed with them. against Carrick in the first day, but it's just an all-round team performance. They're getting everybody's chipping in, everybody's playing a part. And as you know, Sean, that they've had the luxury there of at times, Barry McCambridge and Conor McConville didn't start against Carrick. Shay Heffron rested against Drummatee, then brought back into the team. Dan McCarthy's been one of their standout players all year. He didn't play any football there against the Hearts, so they're just bringing players in, dropping players out. Anybody who's half a niggle or any worry at all is being rested, and they have that luxury, as I said, in the groups. I'm sure that will change going forward now that they're in the knockouts. But the depth of Clonairon is far and away the best in Armagh. The players they're bringing in off the bench is just as good as what's going off, and they're certainly a frightening prospect for any team coming down the track. That Clonairon, they're gonna to stop Clonairon, you're gonna have to be absolutely at your best.
Kieran, before I let you go, I'll ask you the tough one. Who's going to win the Armagh Championship this year now that we're into the knockouts?
I don't think it's that tough of a question, Sean, to be honest. Just after waxing lyrical about Clonairon there, it's hard to see it going on any other way. Look, in fairness, as I mentioned, they could meet Cross, and Green O'Neill could have a spectacular game, and that'll certainly make it interesting. And I know from our perspective in Armagh, we want exciting games, we want close games, and perhaps Clonairon won't exactly run away with it by any stretch, but at the same time, it's that well set up professional outfit, and they look strong. Maybe Clevie could catch a team out, their high scoring team. Even Madden came into the championship with a bit of expectations, perhaps a little bit under the radar now with the fact that they lost in round one. Madden, they'll still come back around, and you wouldn't be surprised if they're back in the mix for another semi-final. But ultimately, Sean, to answer your question in one word, I backed them at the start of the championship, and I haven't seen anything to convince me otherwise, so I'm going to go Clonairon.
Go vote for Clonairon to win the Armagh Championship like they did last year. We're going to take a quick break, folks. We're going to hear a word from our sponsors, and then we're going to invite Mal McMullen and Niall Gartland in, and they're going to tell us about everything else that happened over the weekend across Ulster. Kieran, great to hear from you. Thanks very much for coming on. I'll chat to you soon.
Great stuff. Thanks, Sean.
Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, London Derry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
So we're looking at everything else that happened over the rest of the weekend, and Mal, I'll come to you first. The Derry Championship has been up and running, and there was a few games, big results over the weekend too.
Yeah, Sean, we went from 16 teams down to 12. Drumshurn, Ballinascreen, Ballinderry and Swatter are out, and we have Glen, Magherafelt, Stevestown and Slantmeal are through to the quarterfinals, and then the rest of them are playing the back door. So that's the sort of format. The story probably was actually from the loser section this weekend in the back door, where Banagher came from 11 points down to beat Ballinderry. Oisin Feeney now scored 2 important goals for Banagher just before half time. And to give it a wee bit of context, just before the championship started, Ballinderry beat Banagher by something like 16 points, I think, in a relegation playoff. And then Banagher and their manager parted the company. So there's a lot of things going on in the background where, and then they lost to Glen. But on this game, like Ballinderry had the breeze. Ryan Bell scored 9 points in all. Tiernan Rocks got an early goal. And the Owen Egg breeze was significant. And then just as you sort of felt that Ballinderry were going to sort of still pull away, Tiernan Muir, who finished with 10 points, he kicked a 2-pointer. Kieran Lynch came off the bench, scored a 2-pointer, and all of a sudden it was game on. And you see it so many times, lads, where there is momentum changes and it's very difficult to dig out of it. And then towards the end, I think Ballinderry went 2 up, and that man Muir kicked 3 points in a row to win the game. And there's great celebrations afterwards. Like Banagher were in Division 2 and missed out on that playoff, as I say, and then all of a sudden, they've beat Ballinderry. And from Ballinderry, Sean, I suppose they were in the All-Ireland Intermediate final, and it'll be disappointing from them because they haven't pushed on. And from a real position of strength in the game. I'm sure they'll be very disappointed, and it'll take a while to get over that one. But from Manor's point of view, they now play Dungiven in a local derby in a couple of weeks' time. So that was probably the story away from the so-called contenders for the title. In that back door, I'm just double checking results. Ballinascreen and Kilrea went to extra time. Kilrea won after extra time, and it was a story of the wind. It was a story of the breeze. Ballinascreen got a goal early on. Jared Dillon with a brilliant shot. Benny Hearn on target. Marty Bradley made the goal for Jared Dillon. And then they lost 2 men to black cards with the breeze. It left them in a difficult situation where it was very hard to build on their performance, knowing that James Keelt, who's got a real weapon of a left foot, was going to have the breeze in the second half. And as it turned out, between James Keelt and Dahi McLaughlin, they were excellent. And Cahir O'Neill actually had a brilliant pass for Dahi McLaughlin's goal. They were 5 points going up into stoppage time. Probably 3 or 4 minutes isn't going to do this game justice. Ryan Doyle got a goal for Ballinascreen, and then Ryan Scullion, who just came home from New York to play in the championship, he kicked a 2-pointer into the breeze, level pegging, went to extra time. Kilrea were without James Keelt because he was black-carded for the first half of extra time. Thankfully, they were against the breeze, and then in the second half of extra time, he scored 5 points, and Ballinascreen just couldn't get a handle on the midfield battle, and was an advert for the 40 meter arc that we spoke about on here, and it was an advertisement as to why it's something that's leaving the game very messy. But as I say, Ballinascreen struggled to get hands on the ball, and Kilrea, obviously with James Keelt, they shot themselves into the next round where they'll play Lavey. Newbridge were the champions. They were nipped by Dungiven. We heard on here a few weeks ago, 23 points to 12 winners over Swatra. Swatra had Anton Tuchel back in the panel. Oisin McWilliams, who was long-term injury for Derry and Swatra, he was back in action. Swatra lost a man for half-time and then had to play against the breeze in the second half. But Newbridge built up a really, really good lead, 8-4. The Kearney brothers, the twins, Patrick and Francis, 2-pointers. Their other brother, Sean, scored. They actually scored the whole 12 points between them, the whole household. So they went from 4 down to 1 up at half time. And you got the feeling that Newbridge, who were hurting from losing the first game, they had that spark, but they got it back after half time. Once they sort of, like Anton Tuchel caught a kick out, and you were wondering just would Swatra be able to change things. But, between Conor McAteer and Shawnee Young, and they just had, like Shawnee Young had a couple of goal chances that he missed that would have put it out of sight. And then I suppose it came to the end where they were trying high balls in to try and salvage something. But Newbridge threw, I suppose, as expected, because obviously they're the champions and they were the wounded dog. Also, the other game in that division, Faughan Vale were winners on Friday night against Drumshurn. Owen McElhinney 1-5, Jude Bryson 1-3. I think it was something like 6 up at half time, and then blitzed Drumshurn with those goals, as we spoke about. Tiernan McHugh got a couple of late goals for Drumshurn, but it was sort of consolation stuff. And I suppose the story coming out of Derry last night, it's not totally confirmed yet, but Drumshurn, who moved up from intermediate, they've made representation, as I understand it, to Derry CCC to play intermediate next year. So if they do, they've sent that in. Derry have accepted it, as we understand, and if the other 3 clubs accept the fact that they want to play senior, which I would imagine they will, those relegation playoffs will just be putting them in, and that'll be gone, which is probably helpful from the point of view that if you made that decision in 2 weeks' time, you get 4 teams training for something that's not going to happen. So that's a by the by. So then, obviously, in the front door of the championship, there wasn't as much really talk about here, because a lot of results would have went according to plan, but we're going to run through them. Obviously, the pick of the game was probably on Friday night. Sean, Steelstown beat Loop 2-14 to 2-11. They were level at half time. Loop are in a minor final this weekend. Their manager is a Loop man, and they made the decision to one of their key minors to not play him. He played in the first round. Dylan Rocks, he would have played in the Derry minor team against Armagh, I think it was that day, and yeah, it was the Armagh final in Omagh. So that was a decision they made, and it was talked about that they were planning sort of long term. But as I say, Cahir McMonigal came into this game with 116. He didn't score in the first half, and Steelstown got a messy enough goal, sort of one of those scramble goals, and it was poked home in a crowded goalmouth. And Luke got it. Niall Bean scored that goal, and Steelstown, you just thought, are they starting to let it slip? Keelan Devlin put Luke 3 points up with 7 minutes to go, and then back came McMonigal, nailed a 2-pointer, and all of a sudden they were level. And then Corey McGuinness, playing his first ever championship score, fisted the winning goal in the very last minute. So it was a wee bit like the goal Niall Bean got for Luke, where it was a sort of a goalmouth area. So they're through. That's Steelstown into the quarterfinals. Slaughtneil 216, Blahy 14 points. Goals from Sammy Bradley and Cathal McCaig, a first ever championship goal for Cathal McCaig. And Slaughtneil didn't lead until the 43rd minute of the game. Blahy were on song, who played very well actually in the first half. Charlie Damon, Peter Castey with 2 pointers set the tone, and so that was the story. Then Slaughtneil got it back to level. Shane McGuigan, Rory O'Minin with key scores. Peter Stewart, who was brilliant for Blahy in goals again, he made a save, but they were level. Paul Castey got injured, which was a blow. Then with them coming level, Paul going off injured, and then Cathal McCaig got his goal all within a few minutes, and that changed the game. And then, as I say, Sammy Bradley, he scored the insurance one near the end, and probably flattered Slaughtneil in terms of the scoreline. So that they're through. Glen were winners over Dungiven. Dungiven's running game caused Glen all sorts of problems early on. They got a goal from Conor Murphy, but to be fair, between the McGuckin brothers, Conniff and Johnny, the Jack Doherty was the best player in the pitch. Him and his brother Ethan, Ewan Mulholland, they got a hold in the game. Glen struggled with their kickouts, a wee bit like Newbridge struggled against Dungiven, and about half time then Glen found their way in 4 points up. Dungiven gave away a sloppy goal from a defensive error, so 4 points up at half time for Glen, Sean. So then they took over. Where they struggled with their kickouts in the first half, they actually had a really interesting tactic with it, but Conor Glass in one wing. They only had 4 kickouts in the second half, and all 4 went to the same position, away from the danger zone. Glen won 2, lost 2, but they lost them away from the danger. And so that was the sort of story. Then Johnny McGuckin hit 2 goals basically inside a minute to end the game. And the other angle out of the game was obviously Glen were missing 4 or 5 of their All-Ireland team, who they hope to have back in the next 4 weeks before the quarterfinals. But it was those names I mentioned, Adam, Conor Glass, their key players who were on the pitch, Kieran McFall, they stepped up when they were needed. So they've got over that, they've got over that wobble of their injured players, and they're in the quarterfinals. And then the last game last night, Magherafelt they beat Lavey. Seen very much as a 50-50 game, this one. Probably the most interesting thing about the game was actually Lavey's team selection. Louis Regan, who would have been a goalkeeper in Derry's panel this year, would be highly rated as a keeper in the county. He actually played at full forward wearing number 16 with an outfield number 16. Caelan O'Boyle, who would have been an outfielder for Derry in his day, he was in nets. And they tried to sort of have some sort of a tactic, but it didn't really work out. They weren't able to get the high ball to him that they needed. They did get an early goal through Hugh McGurk, but Magherafelt had 3 first half goals. Conal Higgins, I think the second was finished by his brother Dan. It was a sort of a scramble. Shane Hebron got a penalty before half time, but they created more goal chances, Sean. So for all the sort of steady play that Lavey had, and I've said here before, they're a team I've been looking to see how they do. They just give away far too many goal chances at the other end, and then they were. Let me think. You see that much football, you're wondering. Yeah, they were against the breeze in the second half, and then they were always gonna. They weren't able to play a kicking game, and whenever Magherafelt sort of closed out the running game through the middle, I think substitute Niall Dugan got a chance for a goal late on that would have levelled it, but he sort of lost his footwork when he was trying to go around the last man. And to be honest, it would have been a sucker punch in Maher felt, because they failed to put Lavey away. So Maher felt through the front door in Derry. So from 16 to 12, and like you're asking Kieran about who's going to win in Armagh, I genuinely don't know who's going to win the Derry Championship. There's nobody has really put their hand fully up yet and said, here, pick me. Nobody has done that yet, which is good for the championship. And I suppose the other thing is that I was at a lot of the games over the weekend. Kieran Mina and Chrissy McCaig and the lads around watching the games. So this time last year, Derry didn't have a manager. So from that side of things are different. So that's a very quick summary of the lie of the land in Derry across the games. So and as I say, we say it so often on here that the club championship's brilliant. There's just so much action. I just feel for you as an Armagh, the calculating that you just had to do last weekend. I had to do it for a group hurling match for a Gaelic life piece with on the screen, and that was only one game. So I think the people involved in Armagh deserve a medal for trying to find out who actually did what. So that's the Derry scene.
Now Calvin's well underway at this stage. I think that was round 3 at the weekend. So we're starting to see, the teams rising to the top, I suppose, and the teams that are maybe going to drop out of the championship.
Yeah, it was penultimate round in Calvin. So very very important round in a way. There was a lot of stake with quite a number of teams. Calvin Gales got the first one in the campaign, which was very important for them because they had no chance of advancing. They didn't win that one. They had a comfortable enough one over Castlereagh. They played very well by all accounts, so they take a lot of confidence in that. Mullaghmore got a draw against Gaelic, which on paper is a good result for them, but they'll be disappointed because they were 4 points up with about a minute to go, and they conceded 1-1 right at the very end, but at the same time it shows that they can compete with the big boys, if you know what I mean. Elsewhere, Crushlaw had a good enough win over Killyguy, but Killyguy didn't play particularly badly, so they'll take something from it, and that's 3 from 3 now for Crushlaw, so they're guaranteed to advance whatever happens in the final round. Rammer made a 3 from 3, made a very convincing win over Lara. Ballyhare's got the better arm by a point, and finally, Kingscourt have been going. Sorry, Rammer don't have 3 from 3. They've won 2 and drew 1, so they're unbeaten, but they don't have 3 from 3. Sorry, and Kingscourt have been playing very well, and they beat Ballina by 10 points. So those were 6 matches at senior level in Campbell.
And Mal in Antrim, I think we're at the quarter-final stage now in Antrim, and that's the group stage is over.
Yeah, I'll start at the very end with that draw. Cargan against Ahagallen in a sort of repeat of the 22 final. Portnolan will play some Galls. Cregan against Rossa, and St Bridget's against Dunloy. So that's the way it is. And then if I just do a wee quick check here, you've got Tiernan, you have Aldergrove, All Saints Ballymena and Ahagal. They're finished 4th in their respective groups, and they're now into the relegation playoffs, which is the other side of the coin. Cargan 121 to 218 winners over Dunloy. John McNabb with 8 points from goals. I think they seem to pull away. They sort of pulled away late on in a fairly tight game. Connor Johnson, who I think got his red card overturned. I assume he did if he was playing, so he scored 1-4. Keelan Malloy, Sean Elliott, names you associate with the wee ball with Antrim. They're obviously Dunloy a really good story in terms of the dual side of things. Luke McFerrin with a goal, so top of the table clash there. Also in that group, St John's, Conor Hand got a goal late on. They were winners over Tiernan. I think Tiernan were something like 4 points down, having played against the wind and maybe thinking they're in a decent enough position, but the Johnnies have pushed on and they've sort of stepped clear of that relegation. I suppose a club of the size of St John's, but in the relegation battle would have been a big story in itself. Portnolan 6-16 to 1-7 winners over Aldergrove. Pretty routine. Probably not much to talk about here. It's already done and dusted. Rossa and Glenravel and the other, that was maybe to decide who finished second. I think it was very late on whenever Ross actually got ahead. Eamon Fife and Eamon Ward got goals for Glenravel in the first half. And I think at one stage in the second half, it was 4-4 to 9 points. So that's the sort of story of it. So Rossa finished fairly strong, and that's them through into the quarterfinals. Lavs Yarag were playing All Saints in a third versus fourth to see who stayed away from the relegation spot, and Lav Yarag a tally of 4-18, and I think they were champions. Was it around 16 or 17, something around that? So they're safe, and All Saints are who made real good progress in terms of the league, Sean, that they're up around the top of the senior league, having played intermediate championship football. So it's a busy couple of weeks ahead for them, as they hope they would like to stay up in senior, obviously, because they had a good run last year, and there was that game with Gaelic in Ulster. So but at the top of that group, that was deemed the group of death that would go down to the last day. But in the fact, the only thing down for decision was who was going to finish fourth and who was going to finish first. And who finished first was Cregan, 16 points to 111 winners. With 3 minutes to go, St. Gall's were leading 111, 8 points. So it was just a real turnaround of events. I think St. Gall's may have had a black card later on. And as I say, Jamie McCann, Joe McAteer, Connor Small, they all got those late scores. I saw Cregan playing All Saints at the start of the year, and they looked the part. I thought, this is a contender here. Niall Burns, pretty good for St. Gall's by all accounts. Brenton Bradley with the goal, but the story was all about that Houdini act at the end. It wasn't pressure, but I suppose it depends where you wanted to finish first. Badly enough, St. Bridget's group actually was the one that had the most debate. They finished on 6 points. Ahagallon, St. Paul's, and Hull all finished on 2, and on score difference that forced. I hope I get this right here. That forced Hull into 4th spot, and then as Pete McGrath said to me in the Gaelic Life article, they needed to win as it turns out, they lost and still went through. In that game, Paul Bradley scored 110 for St. Bridget's, and Adam Loughran got a goal from a penalty in that first half. I think there was something like, I hope I'm right here, I think there was something like 16 points down at half time. I don't know if that's how true that is, but that's they were able to turn it around. So you're talking about the Armagh group, about Killeavy was up and down, and all those stories that you and Kieran were talking about. So this group seemed to be a wee bit the same. But I suppose most importantly for Pete McGrath, for Ahagallon, they're finishing in 2nd spot. This was a bit of a shock for me here. Like, Hull had beaten Ahagallon, but they lost to St. Paul's, who were 110 to a point up at a stage. Thomas McGlone got a goal for Hull. I think Noel Crossy may have got a goal in the second half, I think it was, but that puts Hull into the relegation mix. And St. Paul's, I would have felt were underdogs going into that. So a brilliant result for them. I think they won the first Antrim Minor Championship in quite a while, maybe 2 years ago. So from their point of view, that's something to build on. So that's the synopsis of the way it sits in Antrim, where you've got the quarterfinals. I think they're in 2 weeks' time. And very, very quickly, Donegal had one game on. It was a refix game because obviously there was a tragedy in Downings, and as I said, our thoughts are with them. But Dave Connell were 19 points to 210 winners. Kieran Thompson seems to have a knee injury that's going to rule him out of the championship. What I'm hearing is it's not a total ACL, but it's serious. So John O'Malley, Brenton McDyer, Mr. Evergreen were heavily involved in the scores. They had Ethan O'Donnell back. I'm not sure, was he away traveling? I'm not too sure, but I remember seeing him play Donegal underage. He's a good player, so he was back. Jolly McGrady and Paddy McElwee, obviously doing what they do for Maxie Kern's side. But again, the breeze everywhere has an effect. But with 2 minutes to go, I think it was level. And it was Donegal senior panellists, Owen McGettigan and Owen Doherty, remember he scored that winner in the Ulster final, and he went down the pecking order. So in this game, between himself and Owen McGettigan, they pulled Naomh Conall through. So you've round 4 on this weekend, and very quickly here, St. Knowles against Downings, Glenfin against Ardra, Ballyshannon against Killybegs, Termon against Unans. Termon, the league champions, needing something from that to maybe even stay as relegation playoffs. Dunloe against Four Masters, Naomh Conall against St. Michael's, Kilcar at home to Glenswilly. and McCool's, who have been chipping along nicely against Gweedore, and maybe a battle to secure a top 4 spot. So it's first 4 into the quarterfinals, the next 8 playoffs. So that's a very quiet weekend in the Donegal front, but obviously crucial ahead of round 4 this weekend, where we'll be talking this day next week. We'll know a wee bit more.
And now, Fermanagh, it got up and running at the weekend, the Fermanagh Championship. So, how did the opening round go in their county?
Some interesting results, to be fair. Ederney came from 12 points down against the defending champions, Gales, to get a draw. So, some going from Ederney. They scored 11 points in a row at one stage, so they'll be happy with that, considering they did better than right. At the same time, I don't think Gales would be quickly worried at this juncture. It's still early days. Bellalac had a great result against Enniskillen as well. They managed to get a win against another the heavy hitters. It was 9-all heading into the final 15 minutes, and they ended up winning by 4 points. So that was probably the surprise of the weekend in a way. They only beat Ski by 3-11 to 2-8, and finally Timor finished strongly to edge out their neighbours at Nolly. They were trailing by 10-8, and they ended up winning the 13-10. So it was sort of a story of strong finishes from certain teams in the Fermanagh Club Championship last weekend. Sorry, Sean.
So that's a roundup on this weekend's action. We'll be back on Thursday, and we'll have another feature podcast for everyone to listen to. And then we'll be back next Monday again. We'll have another roundup, and we'll focus maybe on a different county and see how everything lies across the province of Ulster. So thanks to Kieran Lynch earlier on for coming on board. Thanks to Mal and Nell, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back on Thursday, and we'll chat to everybody then.
Thank you, Sean.